Thank you for joining us here today. We called you because we need your help. So far this year in Memphis, 18 children have been violently taken from us. 14 were murdered. 1 was ruled a justifiable homicide, and 3 were accidental shootings. Of the 14 murders, suspects have been arrested or identified in 6 cases, and 8 are still ongoing investigations. All of these children were under the ages of 18. The youngest was a 9-month-old baby. You will hear more details in a moment, but I'd like you to reflect on the fact that we had a 10-year-old standing on his front porch with other people when he was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting. We had a 6-year-old and a 16-year-old who I believe were brother and sister inside a house who were both shot and killed in a drive-by shooting. The loss of even one life to violence is too many, regardless of age. But when we lose a child, before they even know what life is and can take advantage of what is out there, is almost unbearable. I'd ask us all to pray for the families of these young people. Now, we need your help. There are people out there, hopefully, listening today who know who committed these terrible acts. Someone knows who did all of these. But we need you to step up and do the right thing. If you know anything about these murders, please call Crime Stoppers. 528-2274, 528-CASH. You can do it anonymously. We need your help. To give more details, I'd ask Colonel Darren Goods to come up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Director. I'm just going to share a few details of some of these currently unsolved homicides with you. We're going to start with 10-year-old Jaden Knox, who on Sunday, January the 19th, was standing on the porch, as the mayor alluded to, in the 700 block of Josephine, when shots rang out and struck little 10-year-old Jaden, who eventually died from those injuries. Just a few hours later, Laquan Boyd, 16 years old, and his sister Ashlyn Luckett, 6-year-old, were inside their home in the 6,000 block of Kirby Mills Cove when they both were gunned down. Laquan Boyd was in the shower. His sister Ashley was just hanging out in her room when they were killed by a senseless act of violence. On Wednesday, March the 8th, 17-year-old Jalen Dodge, who was just simply walking from his mother's house to his father's house in the 1600 block of Sunset, when he was gunned down. His brother is who actually found him lying in the streets unresponsive and tried his best to perform life-saving measures. But unfortunately, it was too little, Too late. Then we have 7-year-old Asian Golden, who on Saturday, April the 11th, simply hanging out in the house in the 800 block of Parr when he was gunned down. Several shots were fired into the house, and little Asian was struck and died in a place that should have been a place of safety for him. On Monday, April the 13th, 17-year-old Tyler Williams was brought to a firehouse in what is now Austin P. Station by friends because he became a victim of senseless gunfire when he was shot and killed in the 3000 block of Chapel. On Wednesday, May the 6th, Tyrell Jones, 15 years old, was in a vehicle in the area of the 4000 block of Barron. He was with another teenager, but he was an adult, Stephen Groggins, when they both were shot and killed. Again, another act of senseless gunfire. Memphis, we are better than this. We are better than this, and we employ anyone that has any information relative to any of these unsolved homicides, especially with these children. We implore you to come forward and provide that information that could change the direction of these investigations. You may think your information is just small, but sometimes it's just a minute piece of information or just a scintilla of information that we need to change the direction of these investigations and give these families some justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Goods, Mr. Mayor. The loss of any life is tragic, but I want you to listen. 9 months, 2 years old, 3 years old, 5, 6, I can go on, 7 years old, 9, 10, 12, 15 years old, 16, and 17. These are by far random numbers. These are ages of the 18 children that have lost their life, a senseless loss of life in Memphis, victims of homicide. These children will not see the future. They will never enjoy what life has to offer. They are gone and they will never return. Their lives were taken due to some act of violence. Their lives were taken mostly because someone chose to pick up a gun. Their lives mattered. Their lives mattered to their family members, to their friends, their classmates. Their lives should matter to society. Memphis, things have to change. This year, we have had 120 murders. 108 of these victims are African American. 6 are Caucasian, 5 are Hispanic, and 1 Asian. At least 34 of these murders involve someone, either the victim or suspect, that is a known gang member. 11 involved domestic violence, and 53 were committed by someone known to the victim. Something is wrong, and as I said before, things have got to change. We have got to change our narrative. If we continue on this rate, we will break the 2016 record number of homicides. Recently, the focus has been on police reform. There have been meetings, conversations, protests focused on what law enforcement is doing wrong, and how law enforcement can change. There have been even those that are fighting to defund police. And I agree, police reform is inevitable. And I agree that change must be made. We are working on that, and we are committed to doing better. Change and reform is very important and is critical, but the conversation cannot stop with police. The Memphis Police Department cannot combat crime alone. Officers cannot be in their homes 24 hours a day. They can't be on every street corner every minute. They cannot force parents to get involved in the lives of their children. And we cannot make citizens do all the right things. What we can do is continue to serve the citizens of Memphis. We will continue to respond to almost 1 million calls for service every year. We will continue to mentor, educate, host hundreds of community events, provide food to those in need, go to schools and community centers, and reach out to youth, go to town hall meetings, host citizens police academy and clergy police academies, increase our neighborhood watch programs, and protect the citizens of Memphis. But we cannot do this without the community's help. As I said, there have been 120 murders this year. Murders. We're in meetings and conversations. And, where are the meetings and where are the conversations and the protests for these victims? Where's the outrage? The passion for finding criminals who are responsible? Why isn't Crime Stoppers being overrun with phone calls? For every one of these murders, someone knows something. You heard from the mayor, you've heard Colonel Goods. Someone saw something. Someone knows who is responsible. I ask again, why isn't Crime Stoppers being overrun with phone calls? As a police director of the Memphis Police Department, I can provide officers who are going to answer calls. I ensure we'll continue to pull statistical data, looking at hotspots and where we need to deploy officers. I can assign officers to the interstate, where there have been 39 interstate shootings this year. I can see to it that even through civil unrest and a pandemic, that our community outreach program is still effective. I can promise you that officers, the investigators, our specialized units will continue to do what they can do to fight crime. They will investigate cases. They will arrest those that are responsible for victimizing citizens. But without commitment from the community, we cannot make the change that Memphis desperately needs. To effect change, we need more people to get off the sidelines. We need more people to be passionate about what is occurring in Memphis. We need more people to speak out about gun crime. We need more people to fight for change through legislation and demand responsible gun laws. We need more parents to get involved with the lives of their children. We need more churches to open their doors and provide counseling and training opportunities for citizens, such as relationship building, anger management, de-escalation tactics, and everyday skills that will help those in our community that are challenged, confused, or even lost. There are over 650,000 residents in Memphis, and even more people travel to work and go pass through our city. To date, we only have 2,049 police officers. To those citizens who get it and do their part, I thank you. I ask that you continue to do what you are doing and continue to support your local law enforcement. But the bottom line, and I can't say it enough, we need to get more involved. We need the community's help. And now we will take a few questions.
Rosita Holden with WMC TV.
Yes, when were the numbers? You mentioned 120 murders have happened this year. When was it that the number was this high that you can recall?
So if we continue on this pace and you think there are 120 murders, but there are 138 total homicides. We're halfway in the year. So in 2016, we had 228 homicides, which was a record number. If we continue on this pace, we will blow that record out of the water.
Chrissy, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes. You talked about the meetings that are happening and the reform and the changes. Anything specific or any more details that you can share with us? Anything we can look out for or that you can once again share with us during this meeting?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, we're here to talk about murders and homicides. We just talked about 18 children that have lost their life. 16 lost their life last year. So let me remind you of a meeting back in February 18th this year. Myself and Sheriff Bonner, the head of the FBI, the head from the local ATF met with about 120 pastors and begged them to get involved. I remember my good friend, Pastor Bill Atkins, asking on February the 7th of this year how he was frustrated, and he asked, where's the outrage of these children being killed? And he was talking about the 3 homicides that happened in January that Mr. Goods talked about, Miss Luckett, Mr. Knox, and Mr. Boyd. So we're gonna focus on that today because we need help. We got families that are grieving the loss of their children. 120 Memphians have been murdered and 138 have lost their life. So I'm gonna focus on that today.
Wendy Thomas with MLK 50.
Yeah, this is for either the director or Mayor Strickland. Director Rollins, you mentioned meetings and protests, and I guess wanting to see more outrage around the deaths of these children. I'm wondering about the Eight Can't Wait policy demands that a lot of the protesters have been asking for. The mayor said that the city has already adopted those measures, but the organization itself says that Memphis isn't following 4 of those 8 policy recommendations. So I'm just wondering what explains that discrepancy.
So you need to talk more to them about that. I think we've been very forthright. We established a website, but let me just remind you, we're going to focus on murder today, and we're going to focus on homicide. So you can go to our website, Reimagining Policing, and find out all that information. But again, my question for you is, what will you do to help us combat violent crime in the city of Memphis? What will you do to help us bring justice to these families that have lost children that we are asking for help on? If we can't rally around that, then I'm not sure what we can do, and I'll ask the mayor to come on.
On a similar vein, we're going to have regular updates on reimagining policing. We're focused today on these murders. The director alluded to it. We've already this year had more children murdered than all of last year combined. This needs to stop.
Wendy, did you have a follow-up question?
No, they didn't answer my question, but that's fine. I'll follow up by email. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Susan Riley with Fox 13 Memphis.
Yes, I was just wondering, you mentioned how you spoke with pastors. What about the neighborhood watch programs? What has your conversation been with them?
Well, I'll let the director answer that in a moment, all of us need to do more. And I said this even last year, all of us. I include parents. Parents need to step up and know where their children are late at night. They need to be in the home. You need to go through their backpacks. You need to find out who they're hanging out with. City government, we need to do more. We've done more in our libraries and community centers, but we need to do even more. We need to grow our summer jobs program. Schools need to do more. Only 25% of our third graders read at third grade level. About 15 to 20% do not graduate high school, they drop out. And of the 80% or so who do graduate, only less than 20% of them are college ready. Schools need to do more. Neighbors need to do more. All of us need to step up and unite, and state legislature needs to do more. The gun laws need to be tightened up and not relaxed. When the guns in cars was allowed a few years ago, the use of guns in Memphis and on Memphis streets greatly increased. The theft from cars and theft of cars, people looking for guns, greatly increased. Director, you have anything on neighborhood watch?
So I think that's a great question. Let me help you out. I'm not talking to our neighborhood watch. Our neighborhood watch are already working with us. I'm talking about the people that know something about these murders that are not bringing forth information. And every time I talk about children being murdered, I think about the 2 years that it took to get information on a precious baby that was murdered. 2 years, someone knew and did not come forward. And that's not acceptable. And we know that someone knows about these murders. So our neighborhood watch, it does a great job of working with us to help keep communities safe. But neighborhood watch, neighborhood, it is the neighbors looking out for each other. So that's the message. If you're not involved with neighborhood watch, we want you to get involved. We want you to get involved on your street, on your block, in your community, because we have to do something to combat this violent crime. And let me remind you of something. Over the 4th of July weekend, 26 people were shot, and there were 4 homicides. When you look at the big picture, over the 4th of July weekend, 80 people were victims of aggravated assault. None of these were domestic violence. These included stabbings, vehicles used to attack people, guns pointed at victims, choking, knives, clothing iron, wine bottles, and physical force. Almost the same Memorial Day weekend. This year, 26 people shot, 4 homicides. So I hope that every time there's a holiday weekend, we're not going to expect this same pattern. So I need everybody to get involved. I just can't focus on neighborhood watch. They're already doing it. I need everybody else to get involved. Everybody that cares about children, everybody that cares about the safety of Memphis.
Ms. Riley, did you have a follow-up question?
No.
Thank you. Bill Dries with the Daily Memphian.
Yes. Do you think that strategies like defund police and some of the other reforms that are being discussed, do you think those are in conflict with what you see as solutions to the problems with violence that you and the mayor have talked about today?
So Bill, that's a very broad question. So let me share something with you. Today we have 2,046 police officers. When Director Armstrong took over in 2011, we had almost 2,500 police officers. Those are lowest homicide numbers we've seen and some of the lowest crime numbers we've ever seen. So when you talk about defunding police, and first somebody needs to be specific and tell me what do they mean and what are they gonna do to replace the resources that law enforcement provides and answer the 1 million calls. A lot of people have buzzwords, but you need to come up with some specifics. So Bill, I think that there is no doubt that we are grossly understaffed. We're being asked to do more with less, and you don't do more with less, you do less with less. So we need to have adequate number of police officers to respond to the calls for service and all the other things that we're doing now. And just think about it, we're in a global pandemic. I've got almost 50 officers yesterday that had tested positive for COVID-19 and another number that are on quarantine. We talk about a demand for resources. Officers are covering testing sites. They're covering food distribution sites. They're covering essential businesses. And because Memphians refuse to wear a mask, sometimes they're called to try to get Memphians to help keep themselves safe. So again, I would love to see someone else take over some of these demands for services, but unfortunately, I don't see them here today. But we definitely look forward to having that conversation, but we need some specifics. The mayor has often talked about the need to hire more police officers. I don't know what else we can say to try to explain it. We've been doing it for 4 years, and if people are not listening in 4 years, either we're not doing a good job or they just don't care.
Bill, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do, for the mayor, if you can respond to this. Mayor, in terms of this debate about police methods, police reform, and solutions to the violence problem that you and the director have talked about today, are those two mutually exclusive topics in view?
To some degree, no. I mean, we want police reform. We are assisting in those discussions and have made those decisions. What's in conflict, though, is the idea that we don't need any more officers or we need a reduction in officers. As the director says, when you look at the data in Memphis, and we've used this chart before, Bill, I know you've seen it, since 2006 was a horrific year for crime. It was before I got involved in government. All these different levels of government got together and decided we're going to do something about it. We started hiring police officers. I got elected in 2008 to city council. We went from roughly 2,000 officers to over 2,400 in 2011. That was the lowest point of crime in the last 15 years and maybe longer. As we've lost officers, the crime rate went up. It's in direct correlation. We have shown, that graph and the data has shown, there's a direct correlation in the number of officers and the level of crime. As we've lost officers down to roughly a level of 2,000, when we got down in 2017 to 1,907 officers, our crime exceeded the horrific year of 2006. Since then, we've built up the classes and we're over 2,000. We have a class that's graduating here in the next couple weeks, which I think will put us just short of 2,100 officers. Our short-term goal is to be at 2,300 officers, but we know we're hundreds short. We need to get back to the point of having enough officers to do all that we need to do. Now, reforms are needed, and part of those reforms may relieve officers of having to do all these different things. And we're very open to those discussions. Police officers respond to every single auto accident, every single domestic violence or domestic dispute call. It's not even a violence call. Mental consumer calls, thousands of those. And maybe there's a better way to do that. And we're open to those discussions, and we're even actually exploring those. But the bottom line is we need more officers. And most of Memphis agrees with that and supports that.
Michaela Watts with the Commercial Appeal. Colby Wilborn with WREG TV.
My question is for Director Rawlings. Out of those murders or those violent crimes, you've often talked about the increase in crime rates with juveniles being the ones who are the triggermen. How many of those cases where you have that it is a juvenile who is the one with the weapon? And I do have a follow-up.
Okay, so that is a little more complicated question, and that will require, going through all the details, but I'll ask Colonel Goods will come up and maybe he can allude to that. But let me just remind you of something. Over the last 4 years, you've heard it from me, you've heard it from Crime Commission, you've heard it from the Juvenile Court Judge Dan Michaels, you've heard it from District Attorney General Amy Wired, you've heard it from many in the community talking about the alarming rise of violent juvenile crime. So we know that too many of our young people are committing criminal acts, and they are committing criminal acts with guns. I recently, this year, was before the state legislature, the Judiciary Committee, along with Mr. Bill Gibbons and others, debating about the problems with permitless carry. So the message has been very, very clear. Every day when I watch your news media, there are reports of robbery, carjackings, shootings, murder. So you report that information. And we know that in these crimes, a number of them are committed by young people. We have had a violent crime problem or a youth violence problem over a very, very long period of time. Back in 2011, when Director Armstrong instituted the COP unit and moved from coax to COP, there was a detailed study that we'd be happy to provide you with that talked about the problems with youth violence, and the decision was made to focus on youth violence. And that's the program that we've been working under for a very, very long time, since 2011. So again, I'll ask Colonel Goods to come up and try to help give you some specifics, but we may have to just give you that detail in a later conversation or email. Colonel Goods?
Okay, to answer that question, I do not have the actual number. You have to look at it from the standpoint of the unsolved homicides. A vast majority of the descriptions of the suspect, where we do not know who the actual shooters are, those descriptions are of young African-American men, and we could assume that they are juveniles, but we don't know that to be fact. They could be in their early 20s or mid-20s, but we do not have that number of exactly the number of that are actually juveniles, because we don't know who those shooters are. And that's why we are employing Memphis to step up and come forward and provide that information. Now, I can get you the information of known suspects, the ages of known suspects in every homicide that's been solved thus far, but I do not have that information with me right now, but I will get that information and push it back out to our PIO, then they can provide you with those answers, hopefully later this afternoon, if that will suffice.
Ms. Watcher, follow-up.
Yes, okay, thank you for that information. And my follow-up, this might be a complex question as well. What is the percentage of the arrest rate? Out of these murders, how many have had an arrest in them? What's the percentage of that?
As far as the percentage of these 18 homicides that we had, I think there are 14 that are, 14 were, I think there were 7 that's actually been solved by arrest.
There are no further questions at this time. This concludes our time for today's briefing. Any closing statements from any of the panelists?
Yeah. So, again, folks, there were a number of questions asked, and I just want to come back on something that the mayor said. We have to do both. We're going to continue to reform law enforcement, but we cannot ignore the violence that's happening in our community. So we need to do both. We are working on law enforcement, but we need the community's help to combat violent crime, and we definitely all need to work together to combat COVID. So again, we ask that if you know something about these incidents, that you call Crime Stoppers or you contact the Memphis Police Department. Again, your police department is here to serve you. We are here to work with you. We care about you, but we need your help to help keep you safe. And thank you.